WEFUNK. We funk.
To get into the 70s, I guess we're going to go to another man with a couple of names, a la Iron Dynamite and Pretty Boy, Money Man, Mayweather. But in the 1970s, his name was Muhammad Ali, and he's the Big LW's KO cast first class of the Hall of Fame inductee for the decade of the 70s, and I guess in a lot of ways, a little bit of the best features from all of the fighters that we've seen so far in the previous decades. As as I've kind of highlighted, some of them have different things that they've brought to the table, where it was really just the immense pop culture phenom that was Mike Tyson, or just the superior skill of Roy Jones Jr., or just the so far and away dominant force and name in the sport, a la Floyd Mayweather, or even the international crossover relevancy internationally of Manny Pacquiao. I guess all qualities could be seen in Muhammad Ali in the 1970s, where he truly was just the defining athlete of the sport, and really, by all accounts, probably the most famous and, relevant just athlete in general, just for his sheer, importance and influence on everything out of the ring especially, but even in the ring in the 1970s, Muhammad Ali was pretty dominant. As over the course of the decade, he went 27-3, with, of course, some epic, several fights of the decade in the span as well. As, of course, 2 out of 3 wins in the classics versus Joe Frazier, 2 out of 3 in the classics versus Ken Norton, split wins with Leon Spinks, of course, the epic beating of the very badass George Foreman in Zaire, win over Ernie Shavers, 2 wins over Jerry Quarry. So all in all, several. So all in all, just a lot of mega fights, as well as wins versus everybody that beat him, avenging all of his losses, who were all to Hall of Fame caliber greats. Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, and Leon Spinks. So he did go down. However, he got back up and would avenge the loss every single time. I guess then ending his career with 2 losses to kick off the 80s, right, as early in the 80s, Larry Holmes, and then his final fight to Trevor Burbank, I think in 81. So for as great as he was in the 70s, he would retire shortly thereafter in the 80s, but really throughout the 70s, like I said, just the in-ring dominance as well as just the out-of-ring, real just, and like I said, pop culture, but also really just, political relevancy, as of course, refusing to go to Vietnam in 66, and then pretty much, being banned from the sport for his refusal until he came back with that fight versus Jerry Quarry in 1970. So really for the entire decade of the 70s was Muhammad Ali's active career, and all post the whole Vietnam thing, and I've really done a bad job, referring to him as like a pop culture icon. He's really one of the most important, crossover figures in sports, not pop culture, but just with the political movement and his civil rights era, and in the mid '60s, and Vietnam, and just so much importance in real world significant things that I don't tend to specialize here on Big LW's podcasts, but just of course using your own sensibility, even just in looking at life here in 2020 with Black Lives Matters movement going on so strong and all, just to think about 50 years ago, post Vietnam, and just where the world was for Muhammad Muhammad Ali to be standing up for what he believed in, and to really just be a hero to people for all sorts of just not just with his in the ring boxing, but a legitimate literal political hero to some, for standing up for what he believed in. Of course, an enemy to a lot of the people in the country that were looking at him as a draft dodger and all this kind of thing, and all of that. So just in the crazy political climate that we live in 2020, to think that 1970 and throughout the late half of the 60s with the Vietnam War and all that, the country was probably even crazier. Of course, I can't attest to that, only being 37 now, so not living through the 70s. However, the 60s rather. You imagine that things were way more fucked up in 1965 when Muhammad Ali really grew to be the living legend and icon of sports, and really just even in general. There's not, of course, it's quite the honor to get in the 70s induction of the Big LWKO cast, but really there's not a list of anything regarding the great athletes that does not rank Muhammad Ali as the very, very short list of the all-time great athletes, not just for his performance in the sport, but for his importance and influence outside of the sport. And again, not just for selling sneakers or whatnot, but just real, tangible, powerful life led by Muhammad Ali. So we're giving Muhammad Ali the Big LWKO cast induction for the 1970s here in our first class of the Big LWKO cast Hall of Fame. All right, I guess taking us to the 1960s, where for the 1960s induction nominee, I'm going Cassius Clay. Of course, a little bit of the pretty boy Floyd to Muhammad Ali's Money Mayweather, if you will. But of course, before there was Muhammad Ali, before the Sonny Liston fights, even. But of course, the great, the epic story that I did a horrible job telling about the out of the ring shenanigans that made Muhammad Ali who he was, of course, started in the 1960s when Muhammad Ali was Cassius Clay, and I guess really starting in the summer of 1960 when a young man named Cassius Clay admirably served his country in the 1960s Olympics in Rome, winning gold for America. So, of course, very meaningful as a boxer to start your amateur career off, or to rather finish your amateur career with the gold medal in the Olympics. So, when Muhammad Ali made his pro debut, there was a major promise and greatness to come. And, of course, over the 1960s, Muhammad Ali really grew to be the standout star in the sport, in the heavyweight division, and even again, just talking about the difference in life, but in the early 1960s, and so we're talking fresh out of the 50s and whatnot. But boxing at this point really is the heavyweight champion is really as big as it gets in the world of sports. This is pre NFL and NBA being crazy popular leagues. The NBA, I don't even think was around yet in actually, yes, I guess it was 1960, but the NBA and NFL are still very fringe kind of sports. Of course, Major League Baseball is real popular, but next to the winner of the Kentucky Derby, the biggest star in sports is the heavyweight champion, and Cassius Clay lived up to what was demanded of him, with, of course, the epic wins versus Sonny Liston, as well as Floyd Patterson, Ernie Terrell, all in the early portion of the 1960s. Of course, like I mentioned, refusing to go to Vietnam in 66. His last fight was in March of 67, getting a knockout versus Zora Foley. Okay. At the time, making him 29-0 WBA, WBC heavyweight champion. And then enters exile for his refusal to go to fight in Vietnam, of course, like I mentioned. And I would tell you to watch the Will Smith movie, but you're not going to really get any quality info from that fucking hunk of shit. But not the best biopic movie by the most important guy in sports history. So terrible job by Will Smith there. But of course, do a little independent research on the true backstory of Muhammad Ali, because I'm focusing more on the more in the ring and of course pop culture relevancy. But even before pre whole Vietnam and exile scandal, Muhammad Ali was the biggest star in the sport as the undefeated heavyweight champion who has defeated Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson, some of the greats already from that era of of heavyweight boxing. So whether he was Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali, he deserves 2 inductions and 2 seats, 2 plaques in the Big LW KO Cast Hall of Fame, as Cassius Clay in the 60s, Muhammad Ali in the 70s. For 20 years, he was the biggest star in the sport, and for literally the 40 years since his retirement, he remains truly he is the greatest. And he will tell you so in the post-fight interview. So the original trash talker, too, I guess. So I guess the original Conor McGregor, who we can claim boxer. But just when you put in any facet of the game, Muhammad Ali is the greatest.
Big F! WEFUNK. We funk.